As you know, Phil asked me to arrange this meeting after the fire in his wire room.
Correction. You asked me to fucking attend. I agreed.
Fair enough. Now, I won't call it a sit-down because of the inclement negative implications. Let's think of it as a meeting of minds.
Yes, welcome, my friends, to Cut to Black, a Sopranos meeting of minds. My name is Jim Scampoli, and I've seen every episode of The Sopranos.
My name is Jacob Burrows, and I've seen 77 episodes of The Sopranos, the most recent being the season finale. No, it's just a middle of the season episode that happens to mark the split between seasons 6 and 6. Yes, indeed. Episode 12 here of season 6. But who put this thing together, Jim?
Yeah, this episode was, Jesus, I just had it. Where the
Oh yeah, here we go.
It was written by Terrence Winter, David Chase, and Matthew Weiner, and it was directed by a longtime director, Alan Taylor. I will say, I mean, I guess I want to say this like right at the jump, is that I do not like this episode.
Interesting. Yeah, I like the episode, but as a season finale, it's kind of a bit different. But also, it isn't the season finale.
Yeah, and I think that's what's in my head is I can't not think of it as, I mean, they describe it as a mid-season finale.
Yeah.
And I just can't not think of it that way. Like, even though, you know, we live in the days now, The Sopranos is done. I could sit and watch it straight through for a week or whatever if I wanted to. But I can't help, like, since we're doing this discussion, doing this podcast, and we do break it up as we watch them, I can't help but think about it that way, because this aired June 4th, 2006. I think it was like another year roughly till the next Sopranos episode. And maybe I'm just thinking about when I initially watched it, because I completely forgot this episode. And then watching, I was like, oh, yeah, this is why. Because it does make sense as just a regular, I mean, it's a Sopranos episode. It feels like one of those Sopranos episodes that, all right, you know, hey, that's no harm, no foul. We got another one coming up. We're in the middle of the season. It's setting some stuff. But I don't know. I mean, yeah, because like the next episode of Sopranos aired April 8th, 2007. So not quite a year, but close to it.
Yeah.
And I can't disconnect that in my head, and I can't not judge it that way, because people want to talk about the episode Christopher as being like the worst episode of The Sopranos. That's the Columbus one.
All right. But yeah, fair.
I don't know. I put this close to it, in my opinion. If not, maybe even not. I'm not saying this is the worst episode of The Sopranos, because even if I was, the worst episode of The Sopranos is still a great episode of television. But I feel like this is one of the worst episodes of Sopranos. Am I wrong? Am I crazy? Tell me I'm crazy.
Well, I think you're crazy, but is that just because of that inability to separate it being a season finale, or is it just you just plain don't like the content of the episode?
I guess it's a little of both, because it feels very meandering, and I know Sopranos is like that a lot. And they're pushing and Sopranos is about it's got all the makings of a Sopranos varsity athlete in this episode, because you got a classic anticlimax with New York and Phil. Yeah. But then at the same time, they're brewing something else with this new guy we're seeing. What's his name? Butch. Where it's like, oh, well, he's the new dangerous guy. Like, he's the new Phil, kind of. Because if, like, at least for how we were left here with this episode, we think maybe Phil might be a little different next time we see him. We've got a lot
change, Jim. People don't change.
And I'm an AJ defender, but we got a lot of AJ here, and I don't know, it's not rubbing me the right way. We got a thing that's been going on that we haven't seen, which I don't mind, like, because with Chris and Juliana, like a thing that's been happening that we haven't seen, but it has been going on. It also has a weird, like, I guess going back to the stylistic thing that you didn't like with Vito a few episodes ago. We've got this overlay extended sequence that I did not like at all.
But Jim, they're doing drugs. That means you need to put weird effects on it. Surely.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe I'm being too hard on it again, because then again, like, the cherry on top is I'm looking at it as a finale. So I don't know. It's still got some stuff. There's some meat there, but I mean, even the Soprano Sessions book, when I'm reading it, they're like, wow, yeah, this is kind of pretty rough, guys.
Well, it's interesting. I personally, I felt just kind of in the way you said, the anticlimax and other parts of it had the makings of a Sopranos finale. Like, I was actually getting some finale vibes in it, but it's also not like a great finale necessarily, but in the way that usually in the penultimate episodes, some shit goes down and you think,
Yeah.
like, you know, it's going to be a big thing. And then the last episode, it's not that at all. It's something different. That's very classic. We should also mention, I know we have mentioned it before when he did pass away, but the episode is dedicated to John Patterson, who has directed every season finale for the first 5 seasons, and he passed away after the 5th season. So I'm not saying we're losing the magic touch with him not being there, but like obviously we've been pretty positive on every season finale previously, and this is hampered not only by being not an actual season finale and all the factors you mentioned, but also it's like it's a weird position for any episode to be in because it's like it's a finale, but it's also building momentum for the end. And like after this, we only have 9 episodes left, so that wouldn't even technically be a full season anyway. So if you do too big of a finale here, is going to take away from the final finale. There's all these considerations, but all in all, I didn't dislike it the way you did at all.
yeah, and I know like it's even like I said, even pointing out flaws and saying I disliked it, it's still an episode of Sopranos. It's still top tier TV. So I don't want to get that twisted. I you know,
sure.
It's not like I would ever be like, fuck this or something. It's just, you know, comparing it to Sopranos, not comparing it to other TV shows. You know what I mean? And again, yeah. And I like going back, because I mean, you kind of mentioned before we started recording, like asking about the decision to split the season, which it is interesting that then they did it like with Breaking Bad, and like other shows do a similar thing where they do the split season. There's like different reports. Now, in the David Chase interview in the Sopranos session, he completely says that he looks at season 6B as season 7. That's what he says. And that HBO did it as a split, season 6A, season 6B, because then they would have to renegotiate contracts for a new season, and people would have had to have been paid more, basically.
Right.
So it was more of a business decision, and in his mind, he completely looks at it as a different season. I think as we watch it, I don't know if I fully will believe that as they play out. It probably will feel like more of a single season, because there are other reports online, although these are just people on Reddit, so who knows.
Well, who do we trust, David Chase or people on Reddit? To be fair, David Chase does kind of like to lie, it feels like.
Yeah.
But then so do people on Reddit, so yeah.
Is that, you know, because people are saying that was an originally planned season 6 would be one final season, but as the writing progressed, Chase found he had an abundance of material and asked for an extension of more episodes. HBO approved, and the decision was made to divide it and present it as such, with Chase taking extra time to plot out and film the exact road to the end. So, like, I feel like there's some truth to that, because, you know, like, if you look at these release dates and how the show played out, there's long breaks before. Again, that's another trend Sopranos kind of started, where they would just take long breaks between seasons. So I could totally. Oh, you all right?
Yeah, sorry. The microphone took a shit. Sorry about that, everyone. We're back. I'm still alive. All right. Yeah, that's an effective way to shut you up, Jim. No, I think there's truth to both of those. Like, you can still see them as separate seasons, but that makes total sense. Even just imagining, imagine writing the last season of The Sopranos, like looking around in the writer's room going like, oh, we got to end this thing, huh? We got to do it in 13 episodes, huh? And then you're just throwing out all these ideas, and you probably got way too much meandering and this and that and anticlimaxes, and like, how are you ever going to, like, everything you try to write almost all the time ends up being longer than you want it to be. So it makes perfect sense, that sort of process as well, and them adding this in. So I guess I see it, but I also see your point of how this episode could have suffered from it. Shall we start going through the beats of the episode?
Well, I want to point out one thing, and again, this is all conjecture. Because I just saw this before we started recording, so I'm sure this is a lot of gossip, and I'll have to research this further. Or listeners out there, if you kind of know more details, if this is complete bullshit, or if there's truth to this, just email us at showswhatyouknow@gmail.com. Because one guy says, I forget which season, but one of them was delayed by nearly a year. Hold on one second. One of them was delayed by nearly a year due to Gandolfini's mental issues. He disappeared for weeks or something, and he staggered into a random New York City barbershop and called the production office speaking gibberish, and they sent some people to come get him, and he was all messed up in the head. And then the response to that is, I believe that was season 6A that was delayed for this reason. Now, I was trying to Google it real quick. There was some articles about him disappearing, but they were mostly about towards the beginning of the show's production. So I don't know. I'm not trying to, besmirch the name of a great actor who's passed away. But I mean, I do know that he definitely had issues dealing with being Tony Soprano, because I think James Gandolfini was one of those guys, at least from some of the stuff I read, that really liked being an actor, but he liked being the type of actor he was, which was like that guy. He'd pop up in movies. And I mean, maybe he didn't expect The Sopranos to be as big as it was, but I guess he's kind of uncomfortable with being like recognized everywhere he went. And I've read some other stories about how sometimes he was a dick, but I'm sure that's true with anyone who's a celebrity. You might meet them at a bad moment. But yeah, I've heard other things about, like, he would disappear sometimes and be like, I can't film this shit, and just leave. They have to well, we can't do anything without Tony Soprano around. But yeah, I mean, again, I'm not trying to shit on he's a great actor. He makes this show. He carries the show so many ways, but I'd be interested to see if there's any truth to that. And either let us know or I'll see what I can find on it.
Interesting. Yeah, it might be complete gabagool, like you said, but then in every gabagool, there's a grain of truth, isn't there?
Very true.
So, with the famous saying, yes. Well, I'd be interested in that too. Though it is interesting that, having watched so much of this show now, as I at this point have, I'm still kind of disconnected from all the behind the scenes stuff, because I leave it basically to you to tell me these things.
Yeah.
It's just kind of interesting because it's a large part of it is I don't want to Google anything about The Sopranos ever, because I'll just end up getting spoiled. So that's really interesting, and I'd be interested in hearing a bit more of that. But for now, let's get into episode 12, the mid-season finale here, which does start out with the continuation of, as we said, kind of a climactic feeling to the previous episode where Fat Dom is killed. We have Carlo disposing of his head, kicking it into a gutter, and even like you said, like, there's a big explosion at the start of this episode, and yet it feels anticlimactic. But yeah, there's a big explosion of the wire room as Phil's walking up to it with some broad.
It is one of those episodes where, like, a lot of time in the Sopranos world is passing throughout this hour-long episode, because at one point it's like they're heading into Thanksgiving, and then Thanksgiving just kind of happens, and then then we're going through the holidays, and it basically ends on Christmas. But yeah, so yeah, we, like you said, we have the disposing of the body, then we have Phil walking up on they still firebombed the storefront or whatever it is. And I wasn't even thinking, because I was like, oh, what'd they do that? They already killed Fat Dom. And it's like, oh, yeah, well, they can't really say they killed Fat Dom. So this is actually even more genius to do that, to be like, why would we kill Fat Dom? We just wanted to firebomb your storefront.
Yeah, we're honorable like that. We just wanted to blow up your place. Duh. But yeah, meanwhile, while Phil's equity's going down, Tony Soprano is cashing in on this Jamba Juice check, because he's in a meeting with, what's her name?
Juliana.
Yeah. He's in a meeting with Juliana, and like you've said, I was thinking of what you said about the season. Tony's been on this journey from being born again, like loving life, and then slowly being dragged down again. And that we did see that with Juliana previously, of him saying, no, I won't go down the same path I did before. I will change for a couple episodes, and then and then he's right back here trying to pick her up again. And it's it's a great way to display the thing that it is becoming more and more clear to me. This is the core of the show, that people don't actually change. They keep being clawed back, and I feel like that's the thing of this season too, especially with Vito. Obviously, his whole storyline of him being pulled back into this life, even though it leads to his death. We see the same thing on a smaller scale here with Tony.
Yeah, because even like before he's trying to pick Juliana back up, when he gets the call from Benny about the explosion, he's like in a hotel room or something with some other just random chick. So, Tony Soprano is back. No need to worry. And yeah, as you said, now he's hitting on her because they, the deal still was in the works, and he has another opportunity to be like, oh yeah, let's make up for lost times. Remember when I was an idiot before and was trying to be different? That all went to shit. So let's cross some T's and dot some I's that I might have missed back in the day.
Yeah, I'll initial you if you don't mind. So his protege, Christopher, is following in his footsteps in many ways here, because he's with his new wife and she's talking about decorating the baby's room, and he's kind of talking about how it makes him nervous and they should wait until after the baby's born. Don't count your chickens before they hatch, which does seem reasonable given the situation. But then we find out later it's not really because of this at all. He's just bored. He's bored, just like Tony.
Yeah, it does feel just like a classic Christopher thing to do at first, because he would be like, going back to what the bird he saw and how he always gets superstitious and caught up in stuff. I guess kind of like Paulie. But yeah, then we see there's a little bit more to it. Then we have Carmela going to the hospital, and Adriana's mother's there. She's all laid out, strapped in, because she tried to kill herself or something. I forget the specifics.
Yeah, because there was like a Salvation Army letter to address to Adriana.
Yeah,
and that set her off, according to Carmela, as she tells Tony in the next scene. I wasn't even sure if I recognized her, but I just assumed it was Adriana's mother. I was like, that was my assumption of where the story would go. And sure enough, that's what Carmela explains in the next scene. Of course, Tony doesn't want to hear any of this because I think, and I'm not sure, is this the scene where she suggests a private detective, or is that later? I'm not sure.
That might be later, but it's coming up here.
She tells him about the dream in France, and he's like, Jesus Christ.
Which is great, because Tony is usually the one that has to be like, working off of his dreams, or, a news report he saw where he gets all hyper focused. And then if anyone else isn't involved, like, they're stupid. But, here's someone else kind of going off their own gut feeling, and he doesn't want to hear anything about it. He thinks it's like dumb.
Yeah. And speaking of how people don't change, this isn't quite the same thing, but when Carmela came back from France, I was like, she's gonna come back and everything's gonna be kind of shit and she's gonna be depressed. Like, fair enough, that happens to most of us after a holiday. We're like, fuck, regular life sucks. But she wasn't really like that. Maybe it was the jet lag, but at this point she's kind of saying that, because now it starts to sink in that Meadows moved away and everything, and she says it's everything all at once. And Tony actually does. I mean, he is distracting her from investigating a murder, what he did. So it's not like he's being a good guy, but he's being a good guy in that he reminds her that, what are you talking about? AJ's doing better. Like, 2 beautiful kids, they're healthy. With the house is great. He even says something about you got a great house, or you're a husband that loves you, made a beautiful home. That's got to count for something, right? And I mean, because we know the mind of Tony Soprano, you kind of go, does it? Does it? No. But he makes I don't know. He makes a compelling argument in this scene.
Yes, yeah. And then we immediately just cut to, I don't know I guess it's the same day because she did bring home a turkey, or it's the next day because now it's Thanksgiving. For you Swedish, Irish, heathen. Sure. Yeah, you don't know what it's all about. But the telltale signs, we saw a turkey. We see them watching football. We know it's Thanksgiving, all right? Just so you know.
All right, I saw a turkey, and I was like, they did mention Thanksgiving. The football thing I didn't connect because I was just like, oh, now they're watching a match. And then I was like, I guess we skipped Thanksgiving. So, but I guess there's a match every year. I've gleaned this.
Yeah, it's there's always like 2 games on Thanksgiving, except now the way we do it, if you go inside, there's Thursday football all the time. So it's not as it used to be, like back in the day, it was like a special deal, like, oh yeah, it's football on Thursday because it's Thanksgiving. But now we have Thursday night football, just so you know.
Well, what Christopher is thankful for is his new Guma that Tony interrogates him about. The name of the episode is Kaisha. I don't think he says the name until later, but he doesn't bring her around because, Paulie would be all weird because she's black. And it's like, I believed him for a second. Obviously I believed him. But yeah, no, it's all lies, of course.
But like Paulie, I mean, if we be nerds, continuity nerds, Paulie had a Latinx Guma.
Yeah.
Because it was what's her face from Scrubs. That's why I remember.
Yes. Yeah.
But I guess maybe that's different to Paulie.
Well, I also think that he says like Paulie would be weird, and they're like, oh yeah, but what the actual truth is, they would be weird. They would all be weird.
Very true.
So, but he just kind of singles out Paulie because Paulie's not there, and Tony even says like, yeah, and she'd feel it too, or whatever. Like she doesn't belong, or what? Like that's the implication I get from Tony. So obviously they'd all be weird about it. So it's a great lie.
And then haven't we seen Hesh's Guma? Whatever. I'm getting too into it.
Yeah, but Hesh is like, yeah,
he's Jewish. Yeah, it's different.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah, so speaking of all of this, we get to see AJ actually at his job doing some work, and I'm like, wow, I've never seen this before in my life. AJ doing something useful, putting cardboard boxes in a wheelbarrow. I mean, I am floored, Jim. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, it's weird too because Paulie shows up and he goes, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I couldn't tell if he meant like, you should be like us and just sit around on the job site, or if he thought he was doing the wrong thing. Because then, I mean, he quickly gets distracted because he starts staring at Blanca, which becomes kind of like the focus of his storyline here. But yeah, it is. I think because Tony even mentions it when you're talking about when he's consoling Carmela earlier. We are seeing like a change in AJ. It worked when he smashed his windshield in instead of smashing his face in. So finding that common ground and just giving some, I guess, tough love, because it's not even, it was very reasonable. It's not like they're making him pay rent or anything. It's just, hey, you got to work and make money and you do whatever you want with it. So now he's doing that. Good for him. Yeah,
and I also assumed this was like to show that Christopher was wrong. I was like, oh, here's Paulie's Guma, who's Latinx, and we're gonna get into that storyline now, and AJ has a crush on her or whatever. But no, he's just there to make collections. And so we get some nice slow motion shots. AJ staring like a creep. Well, who would look at AJ and go, yeah, I'll have a slice of that? Like, I'm not saying he's totally brain dead, but he acts like it when staring at her here and in the bar. But I guess she's okay with that.
And then this is just a nitpick because, I mean, it is a TV show, so you got to, cheat a little bit. But the fact that he's never seen this girl before, it's kind of under the impression he's at least worked here like a couple weeks at this point. And, she handles all the paperwork and stuff, and he's just, never seen her. I mean, I guess he is AJ, so maybe that is kind of plausible.
I mean, he could be a new part of the site or whatever. I don't know how. Yeah. Look, I've never worked construction, Jim. I'm not going to pretend.
I just mean like working a job. It's not like there are thousands of people working this site, but who knows? I guess I've never really worked construction either. Maybe people do kind of go in and out. But Paulie's pretty familiar with her. He knows her, so she's been around.
All right. I don't know if you were implying anything with that, Jim, but we'll leave it for now. So Christopher is hooking up with his Guma, and we get the reveal that it's Juliana.
Yes.
The black Guma does not exist. It is, it's Tony's kind of half Guma, and they have a chat Yeah, I don't. Yeah, what do you make of all this, Jim?
Well, I did want to call out, and I mean, I didn't pick this up on my own. I did read this on the wiki. I thought it was interesting that it's a callback kind of to I guess the character's name was Credenzo Curtis. It's those two black guys that they were going to have kill Carmine, but then they called that off, and then they shot those two guys. But we had that scene where he was talking about his girlfriend Kaisha, and I think it's kind of funny to feel that Chris heard that, and that's the only black name he knew, so that's why he used it. I just think that's a funny little callback they have. I do like that they just kind of drop you into the moment. I mean, it's obviously a very Sopranos thing to do, and then they kind of have a flashback later, which explains it. Not that they even needed it. I mean, it does give more context, obviously, to how their relationship plays out. But I do like that they just kind of drop it in, and now you're kind of have to fend for yourself a little bit to figure out what's going on here.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll get back to that storyline, but we do get the scene from the intro where little Carmine, and again, I just love how little Carmine was once the presumptive boss, and he was intimidated out of the game, but now he's just kind of around being the smarmy guy. He seems way better at doing what he's doing now, but he's still not good enough because he gets them close to a deal, and they're all kind of agreed, bygones be bygones, and then he has to bring up his dead brother, and as Tony says, why'd you have to bring that up? They would have nailed it. It would have been great, but it's not great.
Because things do seem to smooth out a little bit, and it feels like, all right, maybe we're heading to some sort of resolution, because he's just putting it in financial terms, hey, it's costing everyone money, and people seem to react to that. And then whatever happened with your brother and all that stuff. It's cocksucker, classic Phil. Oops, sorry, I just got to follow on my Twitch.
Damn, you're so popular, Jim. Hell yeah. Now, if you want to hear more of that, go to jimandthem.com for Jim's podcast, where you get fun sounders too.
Yeah, I don't mean for that to bleed into Cut to Black, but yeah, sorry, my Twitch is running, and people might follow me. I get an alert.
Well, it's a hard knock life being on the pulse of social media all the time, as you are. But someone's got to do it. Anyway, the whole thing blows up, and like you said, it's kind of they blew up the fact that they blew up the wire room kind of gives cover for the fact that they killed Fat Dom.
Yeah,
because they kind of because that was the thing he was going to originally do, and then they did it anyway, and then later they're talking about how they can't be sure that it was Tony, when they're in private. So it at least does something to assuage their suspicions.
Well, it's great too, because it does show a lot about, I guess, not just Phil, but these guys in general, because I mean, we saw how ferocious Phil was, obviously, when it was his brother. And I mean, I get that is a closer relationship, but Fat Dom is more of an afterthought. They all kind of know he's dead, but when he's brought up and then they bring up money, things do still settle down where it's okay, yeah, we get it. But until, of course, the brother comes up. But it's just interesting that all of these people, they're kind of not that if they do go, it's kind of part of business, unless of course it's family or someone that's off limits or whatever perceived extra insult you might get. Fat Dom to Phil is almost kind of it's because I shoved a pool cue up Vito's ass, so I guess they get to kill Fat Dom as long as I don't find specific evidence. I'm not going to search for the evidence, but if the evidence pops up, then I'll be mad about it.
Yeah, exactly. So we're in a bar. AJ's having some fun chats with coworkers, and Blanca's there. He does his move, which is to stare at her, and she dances up seductively and strikes up a conversation. Does basically all the work in this in this situation, and except that she gives her phone number and leaves off the last digit. And I'm does that mean? I imagine maybe he used the phone. You could use a phone book, but it's AJ, so I imagined he just dialed and tried all the different numbers, right?
Well, that's what I would think you would have to do, because I guess now I'm thinking maybe then, because I don't know if it's a home number. If it was a cell number, there's not a phone book you can check. is there? But
I mean, I don't know. This is all America, man.
yeah.
I have no idea how your phones work, your fancy phones.
I actually would. I would have greatly enjoyed a
scene.
montage. Yeah, maybe you can do the Vertigo montage that they do for the theater, except it's AJ calling each number, and then they're all overlaid. It's like, "Hello, is this Blanca? Hello." Oh,
No,
sorry,
do
sir.
the vertical one, but then you also have AJ in there dialing. So
Overlaid on the same
fade
theme.
to that, and then fade back and calling all these people.
Oh, is this Blanca's phone? No. Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. Oh, yeah. No, I'm sorry. Like, and you can have little hilarious asides happen. Now, what do you read from this? Because I don't know if the show ever really gets too explicit, one way or the other. So, I mean, is this what we've been seeing that AJ's had to deal with this season, of how people are attracted to him because of who his father is and the potential power he might have? Or is this just the natural magnetism of the Soprano genes? Like, we see that Tony can just have women come up to him like that. Is it just rubbing off on AJ?
I just assumed that Blanca likes him young and smooth faced, and someone who's in contrast to her ex, who used to beat people up, who's kind of a nice and extremely non-aggressive guy, someone that she can make the move on, and they won't actually be a dick, and they can watch 40-Year-Old Virgin and have a wholesome time. And like, her one question is like, oh, I have a kid, is that okay? And he's like, yeah, and that seems to tick all the boxes. So I guess it's the magnetism, as you mentioned, the natural magnetism, rather than I don't think it's because he's the Soprano son at all, really, to be honest.
Although,
with you,
I think I mostly agree with everything you're saying. Although I think it's very telling that the way they cut from like him getting the guys to leave the neighborhood that are being loud, and then her having sex with them, because at least she still wants some power there. Because I mean, I don't know if he came up and was like, yeah, I gave him my bike and they left. And it's like, oh my god, great. But yeah, I think you're right that she does want definitely a contrast to what she's had, but she still wants, somewhat of an alpha, like all women do. I mean, if we can get to our
yeah, let's get into it, Jim. We've waited too long. Here's what women want, all right? Take it from us, two cis white straight men.
But yeah. So yeah, it is interesting. And especially like if we stay with AJ for a bit, like jumping around between seeing him, doing real work at his job, and them even talking when he's not on screen about how like he has been up and out of the house early going to work. And then by the end here, like he is legitimately good with her kid, and it feels like he's, a different person and actually taking responsibility for things. And then it is great that the flip side of that is now Carmilla is like a little like kind of suspicious. I mean, between her being older and I assume her being Latina, and then of course her having a kid, it is I'm not going to say it's understandable to be suspicious that she's Latina, but just being older and having a kid, it's kind of like, uh-oh, does my like fuck up of a son understand what he's getting into? But it is like a be careful what you wish for type deal.
Yeah, and also on all of this, so strange to see AJ have sex. So strange, Jim. Like, good on him and all, and like this seems wholesome enough, but it's so weird, Jim. He was looking for that fly just yesterday,
Yeah. It is. That's the bizarre side of shows. Well, I mean, especially cable shows, when you have kids that then grow up with the show. I mean, I know it's a different show, but the show's Shameless now. I mean, it's been on for like 10 seasons. So now you have like little Carl and little Debbie who are kids. Now they're grown up, and now they have like, sex scenes on the show. And it's like, this is weird.
Yeah. So we going back to where we were after the bar scene, Juliana gets a call that's like an emergency call, and she answers like it's her dad, and it's Tony. So great impression to make as well when you want to like go out with someone, give them a big scare about their father maybe dying or whatever. And he starts talking about a warehouse. It's all an excuse, obviously, to see her, even though it probably would be beneficial. But she sees the business side of things and agrees to it. And then we head into an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, I think, and it's a flashback. And I kind of like that we don't necessarily. I don't know. I like the way this flashback worked. We didn't have the infamous like freeze frame fade or whatever. You don't need it. You get that this was before the other scene. But I will say that the inclusion of this flashback made it a bit jarring when we go from a scene when they're super like, we're not going to do any drugs, absolutely, like not even like I'll maybe have the tea, and then you cut and then they're immediately doing drugs afterwards. And I get that that says something about, you know, how the slippery slope, but it's also with this flashback, it's kind of like, wait, is this a dream? Like, what's happening? Like, I don't trust the sequence of events anymore because of this particular flashback being in this particular place.
Yeah, no, I could see that because they're making a statement with the latter scene that you're talking about when they're doing drugs, because you know we hear from Murmur, who's Chris's sponsor, and they talk about how like it's not a great idea for two, you know, people in recovery like that to be in a relationship, but there's potentially that they keep each other in line, or it's potential that they both drag each other down. So they do make a statement by just cutting to that happening. But you're right, the way they handle this flashback, which I do agree is a good choice in the way it's done. You pick it up. But yeah, I mean, because even like I said before, just jumping to them having sex to show that Chris was lying about his guma, like they are like challenging you a bit, which you know is always good about the Sopranos. But then, not that it's not welcome, but sometimes then it gets jumbled up as you're trying to figure out, okay, what's this then, or where are we in the timeline right now, and what's happening?
Yeah, and maybe it's just coupled with the fact that it's like season finale, we're fitting in a lot of stuff, and it takes place over a month. Like we were saying, it's Thanksgiving, now it's Christmas. But anyway, I don't think it suffered tremendously from it, but I wanted to mention it. And then we have a scene with Tony. I mean, after the flashback, let's skip over it. We know what happens in it. We have Tony watching a documentary about Abe Lincoln, and I'm always struck by like the quality of television within the world of The Sopranos. They always seem to be stuck on, I guess, I don't know, public access channels or whatever, where it's just old movies and documentaries and things like that. So he's watching something about Abe Lincoln. Carmilla comes in, talks about a toy drive, and this is where she brings up like private detectives. What if Adriana's in danger? And so on and so forth. And he says like, oh, we wouldn't want to invade her privacy. And then this is all leading up to him going and saying, you know, we'll all be happier if she has a career. Go and talk to that building inspector.
Yeah, and he's in classic Tony Soprano mode where he's got his bowl of ice cream like right on his stomach. And you know, we know when he's in this mode, he doesn't want to be bothered. He's watching his History Channel, he's eating his ice cream, he's comfortable, and then Carm has to come in and start talking about toy drives and, you know, people he's had killed and hiring private investigators to look into it. And it is kind of going back to our old thing we haven't mentioned a lot, but like The Sopranos is a sitcom. It is very sitcom-y, the way it then cuts to him being like, yeah, we got to lean on that building inspector. Like, and it almost like it's not that, but it almost lends the idea that does Carmela understand what she's doing? Is this her playing chess while Tony's playing checkers? I don't think that's what it is, but it's almost fun to play with that idea.
Yeah. So now that you know Silvio's being sent off to deal with that, he can continue trying to pick up his ex Guma, and so they're in the warehouse, and he starts asking about her fiance and everything.
Sorry, real quick, and then don't we see the Muslim guys real quick again, right?
Oh yeah, we sure do. We got to keep that threat going because that's definitely going somewhere.
You know, yeah, exactly. It's so funny to think like. I mean, obviously watching it now with the show in hindsight, well, I mean, you don't even have the show in hindsight, but just discussing it, it's so clear that this is going nowhere. I mean, and again, I don't even remember. I know I've seen these episodes, but I feel like this is such a David Chase, like, huh? What about these guys? And you're like, yeah, whatever. All right, David Chase, we know what you're doing.
Yeah, it is kind of like that because it's like they introduced the concept early on that they might, the titillation, the suspicion that they might have some connections to terrorism. And then you just have them show up over and over. So the audience kind of goes, yeah, while all of this is going on, maybe money's being funneled away to Al Qaeda or whatever.
Yeah.
But probably we'll never find out about it. But let's just keep bringing them up and have them be really cool and like say happy holidays to your family. And that's it. That's all. Sometimes they ask for weird weapons, but like, yeah, most of the times they're just hanging out, cheersing folks left and right.
And it's just an interesting way to play with the audience because, I mean, like, what was this in 2006? So like 5 years removed from 9/11, which, we're well past that now. But, it's no secret that people had different prejudices coming out of 9/11 and, they're playing on that with just Tony and the characters in general, but they're kind of playing with the audience as well and building up their expectations on what they think is going to happen. So it is kind of like it's like a smart way to play around with that.
Yes. So in the next scene, we have Christopher sharing his screenplay with Juliana, and as any creative person knows, this is like fourth base. Like first base is you have sex outside a cafe after your Narcotics Anonymous meeting. Second base is you watch a movie. Third base, I don't know, your Wi-Fi connects automatically when you go to their place. And fourth base, of course, the home run. You share your screenplay, and she gives honest feedback. Oh, what a great coupling! I'm sure these two will work out and won't be bad for each other.
They start talking about Tony too, where like now we're getting more of like the implication that they're both kind of getting revenge on Tony in a way.
That Tony's kind of part of it, even though he isn't, is the kind of feeling. He's like there, he's in the screenplay, he's in Christopher's mind and in her past and all these things, and also in her job. And Christopher even says, like, she says nothing happened, and he says it doesn't matter. He's been there in his mind, which is such a weird, degrading thing to say. But they kind of get over it for the moment, at least.
Yeah, I'm not a fucking parking spot. And then she says, and yeah, because I guess like it is between, Carmela with Adriana, and of course with Chris, it's always going to be a thing hanging over his head, and especially. Building this home with I can't even think of what his fiance's name is. I
have no idea.
Kelly.
They're married as well. He's not a fiance.
Oh, that's
She's not
right.
a fiance anymore.
That's right. Married now. And that's obviously kind of even more in his head of like, well, this is what I was supposed to have with Adriana, and Tony's obviously a big part of that. Plus, back in the day when Tony used to be nice to him, push him on his big wheel, and then when Tony Ache showed up, he would make fun of him. So we can't forget that.
Of course. So we have this meeting that we've already discussed of the New York Mafia. We're introduced to this new character that I don't think you like, who's like, oh, I'm the new guy who's pushing everyone to be more extreme. Now, I'm Phil's Phil. Like, I'm the guy in Phil's crew who is like Phil was in the original crew, saying that, we got to fuck up Tony, and he keeps pushing. And then we have some moderates. I don't know what they arrive at. I think they say that, like, okay, Phil refuses to whack a boss, and they're like, all right, fine, but pick someone over there, eye for an eye.
Yes, yeah, which does add like that extra
finale tension that goes nowhere.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I love about this scene and like where they're going is that the look of these guys, like everyone just kind of looks schlubby and kind of like, I don't know. There's no like going back to like Patsy's line to Gloria, like it won't be theatrical, or what's that might not be it won't be cinematic. Like it's kind of they're very, there's a specific look to the Italian mobster, and this is supposed to be New York, like they're supposed to be above Jersey, but just schlubby chubby dudes, like, and especially Butchie here, who's like talking about, it's like 9/11. They wanted attention. Now we go and we wipe them off the planet. I don't know. I like that detail because it's probably because Phil. I'm spacing on his Frank Vincent, who plays Phil. He's in like every mob movie. I mean, R.I.P. Great actor, but like he has that look, and then these guys around him don't have that look. It's like, and that adds like realness to it, I guess, in a weird way, because it's just kind of like the dudes you'd see just bullshitting in the back of some shitty deli, but it's like meanwhile they're talking about murdering people.
I had a similar feeling when we were in Phil's home later. I was kind of like, the Soprano house, the casa, if you will, the Casablanca. It's obviously gaudy and everything, but it's like huge and beautiful and over the top and ridiculous. And like Phil's homes, he definitely hasn't like moved since becoming boss. Yeah, he has more income or whatever, but he probably couldn't spend much of it even if he wanted to, just tax and all hiding it from the authorities. But also like, I don't know, his place just looks not super fancy, which makes sense because have you heard of like prices in Brooklyn? It's ridiculous. You could probably get a mansion out in Jersey for the price of a little hovel there that fills in Brooklyn.
Well, but going back to Phil here though, is this just more heavy as the crown, kind of like the stuff that Johnny Sack and Tony talked about at the end of season 5, when like how if they only knew what it was like to actually be the boss? Because could you imagine Phil before being like, whack a boss? We're not going to do that, because he was the one that was like, we got to whack their glorified crew. Is this change in Phil? Does it feel real? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'd buy that. Like you said, it's easy to be the guy who's under film now going like, oh, we got to do this, we got to do that. You don't have to be reasonable. It's kind of like when you're in the opposition politically, like you can say you're going to do all sorts of shit, but the moment you're in power, it's like, oh, well, we got to do some compromises here, and our budget's actually not limitless, so we can promise all sorts of shit when you're not in power. And then you get there and you're like, well, I don't actually want loads of people to die, and like I don't want more of my family to die, and so yeah, I'd buy that read of it.
Yeah, I agree. It is interesting to see that play out, and yeah, it is really kind of like, I know it's only been one episode or whatever, but it is, even in my mind as the audience, it's like, Johnny who? Like, yeah, forget him.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. So we have Christopher coming out of a meeting, and he's talking to his sponsor about the whole situation. And like we've already mentioned this, how it's said that, they might be really good for each other or really bad for each other. We'll keep an eye on it. And then we also have Juliana with her sponsor, and she's talking about how, like, I think maybe he's connected. Actually, I know he is because I was going out with his boss, Anthony Soprano. And his sponsor's, like, a reasonable person. Like, I don't know where to start here. You don't know.
Yes.
You haven't lived here all your life. You don't know these people are psychopaths and all that. But obviously, she doesn't take that advice.
Well, it's so hilarious, like the amount of red flags that she's bringing up here. Never mind just the fact that we met in AA and we're both kind of still in a somewhat, volatile situation as far as our addictions are concerned. But also, yeah, I know he's connected because I had a almost fling with his boss, and these are like big names in the mob community. This is, it's all bad news.
Yeah. So we get the continuation of AJ's story here. Like I said, watching the 40-year-old virgin, and they're loving it.
That's the contrast to what you're talking about, how they're always watching like old stuff. But now we're with young kids, they're watching, at the time, I think, a pretty new movie.
Yeah. And do you think this is AJ's choice of a film or her choice of a film? It's a very important question.
That's actually a great question. Because if it's her choice, it's her like throwing some shade at him, right?
How do you mean?
Well, not like shade, but just being like, yeah, you're probably a virgin. Like, look at you,
right.
little baby. Or-
I think it's his choice of a film, or maybe because he obviously worked at Blockbuster, probably stole all the DVDs or whatever, so he just has films. So he brought it over, and he's kind of introducing some of this comedy because she kind of goes like, this man is so stupid or whatever about the 40-year-old virgin. What does she say? Just she's kind of laughing at it like she's not seen it. That's my read of it, and this is the most important part we need to analyze, Jim.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, they're watching the hilarious scene with the waxing. It's a classic. You immediately know what they're watching. Then what? Her baby wakes up because you got some hoods out on the street bumping some Pitbull. When I guess it wasn't embarrassing to bump Pitbull. I think there was a small window of time when it wasn't embarrassing to be bumping Pitbull, Mr. Worldwide.
Sure.
And it's hilarious AJ fashion too, of the way he handles this. Like he comes marching out with all this piss and vinegar, but he quickly realizes like, wait a minute, what am I going to do here? Oh, I'll just give him this expensive bike, which would almost lend to the idea that, well, you're giving them something now, they're just going to keep coming back to get something over and over again, right?
Sure. I just kind of love this scene because I guess when he goes out, he doesn't know what he's going to do, maybe. Maybe he does. I don't know. But yeah, he comes down and they're sort of like looking at him. And I just love how it plays out of him coming up quite meekly, like, hey, it's only a year old. Like, I'll give you this bike if you go away. And they're and I love that their reaction is not like, nah, we'll take your bike and fuck you. They're kind of like, that's fair. All right. We'll take your bike, sir. This makes sense in our world. And it's like total win for him because he probably never rides that bike anyway. And he, has sex afterwards. So well done, AJ.
Good for him.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to, did they have like pillow talk here? What do they talk about?
Yes, they do. Yeah. They talk about, he asks if it bothers her that he's younger, and she says like Jesse Ventura was born on your birthday. So and he's like, who? And she says a famous politician. I looked it up. I don't know anything about this.
And it's like, oh yeah, she knows his birthday because she handles his like W-2 and his paperwork. So, I mean, I guess that also lends itself to the idea that she knows who he is. Obviously, she knows a lot of information about him. So I don't know. There's some nefarious purposes going on. Stay tuned. Jesse Ventura also is he was former WWF wrestler / commentator back in the good Hulk Hogan 80s days of wrestling, who then did turn politician, governor of Minnesota, I believe, turn conspiracy theorist who had like a running show for a while about all his conspiracy theories. I'm sure he's still doing conspiracies. I don't know what he's up to these days.
I'm sure. I mean, no offense, Jim, but your country's ridiculous, and the way it runs is silly. I mean, I actually lots of silly things about where I'm from, but like the sentences you've just said make no sense.
Well, have you ever seen Predator, the movie?
Yeah.
He's in Predator. Jesse Ventura. He also was a Navy SEAL. I was a fighter, a Navy SEAL.
All right, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, of course, is the template that we'll follow.
He was also
all right. Sorry, what did you say? He was also in Predator.
Arnold Schwarzenegger was also a politician.
No, I know that's my point. That's but that's the one you know about, and then you find out no, loads of people did that, and this guy was a wrestler. Now he's a conspiracy theorist. I'm like, all right, America.
I think Jesse Ventura did it first. So good for him.
Go home, America. You're drunk. Yeah, it's very sweet pillow talk. She rides him like crazy. Great.
Like a bike.
Great for them. Yep.
Like the bike you just gave away.
I get it. Next scene. Let's do the next scene. So Juliana's sick. Christopher comes over. He's being a good boyfriend. Apart from the fact that he's married, talks about how he's gonna get some cough syrup, and she's like, "No, absolutely not. There's like, chemicals and stuff in there. As we all know, stuff is bad for you. Makes me make you relapse." And she convinces him to go get some valerian tea, and then they smoke heroin. That's like the gist of this, right?
But that was like kind of the plan, right? Because she's not just going to drink valerian tea, because she says you're going to put like 10 pouches in the water and then it makes it like Valium or something like that, because it's from. So it's almost like she didn't want cough medicine because she knew it wasn't going to be as like strong. I mean, again, I don't know about this, so I don't. Maybe I'm reading it completely wrong, but I read it as it's not like they're just going to drink tea like, oh, my throat hurts, I'm coughing, I'm going to have, a nice spot of tea with some honey. Because she specifically says like you take like all of it, you throw all this tea in the water, and it makes it like, I don't know, fuck your head up or something. It's like taking Valium.
Yeah, but it's from the health food store, and nothing you buy there actually works, Jim, or does anything.
Yeah.
So that was my read of it. She's trying to go the healthy route, i.e., the placebo route, not go into these chemicals and things that'll make you addicted again. So that's why it was a bit of a whiplash for me. But maybe I'm wrong, and it's actually way stronger this way, and that's why it makes perfect sense. Like, it does make perfect sense either way. It's just a bit. Like, it's an interesting choice to just skip over all the middle bits, because this is the extreme one way, and obviously it flips to the extreme the other way when they're in the car. The next scene we see.
Yeah, because the next time we see them, they're freebasing, and like there's a comment later where they're like, "Hey, we're not using needles. Isn't it great how we can handle this?" Like, but we have AJ helping Tony with the Christmas tree. Carm gets the letter from the inspector. Her spec house is back. I think someone had mentioned, I think it was on one of the Sopranos Facebook groups, where they're like, drinking game for season 6, drink anytime the spec house is said.
Yeah.
This fucking spec house will not go away. I mean, because I guess it's been going since, well, okay, it was the end of last season, because it was after the whole Adriana thing. But I think she was probably talking about it constantly. It is like the replacement. Carmela used to have men she would gaze at and long for, but now it's just constantly talking about this goddamn spec house. I'm so sick of hearing about it.
Yep. Oh yeah. So then we have, but she gets the permission now. So don't worry, Jim. It's not going away. They're gonna keep working on the spec house, I suppose, throughout the Sopranos until the very end, and it's just gonna end on the spec house, and we cut to black from that.
Yeah.
But we'll have to see. So then we have Phil in his home again. This is what I meant, where it's like it doesn't look bad, but it's also like looks a bit old. The house, they probably lived there forever.
It looks like Junior's house almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's not a bad house, but it's not like the gaudy like Sopranos home.
Someone leaves like a brush or a broom or something. Is this a character we're supposed to know? Is this?
I don't think so. I guess it's just their own one-legged Russian maid.
Yeah, I was like, is this the one-legged Russian maid? Because she looks a little bit similar, and I'm face blind apparently. But I guess not. The point is, he's feeling a bit off, and the end scenes with him going to take a shit, and then they're in the hospital. So I guess the shit didn't go too well. And yeah, he doesn't have any signs of a heart attack, so he's actually fine. And here's some antacids.
And then then he wakes up in the middle of the night like having a fucking. And now I wasn't sure if they were setting up where, is this all in his head? But it's no, just the doctors missed it. Which it's one of the scariest things where you're kind of doing the right thing, where you're like, I feel a little off, and you go to the doctor and like, what do you mean? You're fine. Just take some, take some antacids, take some valerian tea. Don't even worry about it. And then you go home and die.
Yeah. So then, well, in between those scenes, we have the freebasing bit in the car, which is great. I'm down this path again.
It is nice. It's a nice like thing of like visually showing their relationship change, because not to be blue, but she goes to put her head in his lap, and it's almost like as if she's gonna go down on him, but it's like no, it's just she's high as fuck, and then he's high. And they do mention later on, like, it's not like a sexual thing anymore. They're just, drug friends.
Yeah, and I couldn't even tell if that was like, we don't even do that. And I was like, are they so high that they're like, we haven't done that today, or are they like, we haven't done that for 3 weeks, or like, what does this mean? But it doesn't really matter. So the news of the heart attack arrives at the Bing, and Tony's like chuffed. He's excited. He's gets shots for everyone, and Paulie and Silvio are both kind of like, yeah, but the devil, we wouldn't want this weirdo other guy who's like who wants to kill you to be the new boss in New York either. So,
Yeah, because it's almost like Tony forgot. It was at one point it was great for Johnny to be the boss, and then Johnny was the boss, and it sucked for a while because he hated Tony. And then things started getting good, and then it was like, oh shit, Phil's gonna be the boss. But then him and Phil were kind of friendly for a while until they weren't. And so now it's fun, but Tony's forgetting that, like, no, each time this changes, it's worse. So maybe don't celebrate too soon.
Yep. And then we have a scene with Junior, which is kind of like it fits into the flow of the episode in that it's Christmas and it's a finale, and like the gang's all back together later, and Junior's not there, obviously.
Yeah.
Which again, it's quote unquote only been like 10 episodes since he was kind of part of the family, and everything was cool with that until it wasn't. But yeah, so it's kind of also. I don't know. Do you feel like this scene makes sense in the episode or not?
I think it does, and maybe it's because like the main takeaway I have from this is like, oh man, I miss Junior so much.
Yeah.
And it also is like it's very sad because especially they're playing up that it's the holidays, and Sopranos finales do typically end with all of the family somewhere, whether it be maybe not always all of the family, but it always ends with family doing something. So just a nice reminder that especially during these holiday times, Junior is alone, like, and never mind that he's sick and unwell, but he's completely alone, and he really lights up when Bobby comes, and he's like kind of what is he's like makes an announcement to the group. Does he talk about he's like baklava, like it's salted cod or whatever he says.
Yeah, we taught the world how to eat or something.
Yeah. And then I almost at the beginning of the scene I'm like, oh, because it would almost feel like a Bobby thing to do for him to come see Junior on Christmas or around Christmas, even like in secret. But then you find out it's not even because of that. It's like Junior had sent him money or something, and he can't accept it, and he mentions he shouldn't even be there. Like if he saw there, like it would be a big deal, and it's like even worse for poor Uncle June.
Yeah, and he says he had someone drop it off, Beppe, and I don't know who that is, but I was kind of interested because I'm like, who does Junior have that actually visits him that could bring money out? I don't know, but he tried to send the money to Bobby anyway, and yeah, it's returned like you said, so he foists it upon one of the caretakers, I guess.
Yeah, one hand washes the other. Basically, you might as well put it to some good use. He'll get some sort of perks or something out of it.
Yeah, is he aware of what he's doing there, do you think? Or like
I feel like he is, because I think what we see is that sometimes, I mean, and especially if he's been here, maybe they do have some sort of treatment going on. Maybe he does have some better medication or something, where sometimes he has, he's lucid a bit. Because even like when they talk about the Tony shooting, and he's kind of aware of it, but then like what he brings up JFK, like where he's like, maybe I didn't act alone. It's like,
yeah.
Like, oh man, poor Junior.
Yeah, that's all we see of him this episode. But yeah, so we have Tony hanging out with the fire department as he's What did you say?
I just said yucking it up, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, yucking it up for sure. Like, I'm just like, as he's wont to do. He's a pillar of the community, I guess. He's just hanging out with all sorts, of course, in his neck of the woods. So we hear the tail end of some shit joke, and they kind of walk like.
I actually had a note on that, because that's the joke. I think we heard it in the previous episode, or it's the episode before that. He's telling the pig joke. Where it's like, the guy comes home with a duck on his shoulder, and he goes to his wife, that's the pig I've been fucking. And the wife goes, that's a duck. It's like, I forget the fucking, why am I forgetting the punchline now?
I wasn't talking to you.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, I wasn't talking to you.
That's a great point that was the same joke, because of course he's using that joke. That's great, actually. I just, as you were, this is an aside, but as you were talking about it, I was like, what was that joke? And I Googled the punchline, like, the husband said I wasn't talking to you. And I just found it mildly funny that all of the results are like along the lines of emotional abandonment, shut out by your spouse, issues I face. Or my husband has not spoken to me in 4 days and it's killing me. Anyway, that's what's hilarious to me for the moment. Tony sees Christopher talk to Juliana in the car, and he immediately knows what's up deep down. Christopher sees him see them, knows what's up deep down, but they do some acting back and forth where he says she's a friend of Kaisha's and that they asked what present to get or something. Just lies all around.
I told her to get a Luther Vandross box set because that's what he's like. Yeah, what would you get a black girl for Christmas or her birthday, whatever he says there? It's like, oh yeah, get her Luther Vandross.
Which I didn't know what that was, but I assumed it was racist somehow, or at least like him making an assumption, like you said.
Yeah. Then we have because then it's just what they have the scene with them together. Oh yeah, and they're talking about, isn't it great how we can use again and like keep each other together and we can just integrate it in our lives? And it's like, yeah, no, you can't.
Yeah, it's interesting as shit. They have this mastery. It's not easy, and
it comes down to basically like now the better play is to just tell Tony that they're having an affair, because even though that was bad before, it's not as bad as him knowing that they're both doing drugs or whatever. So that kind of sets up where he then goes to meet Tony to tell him what's going on. And, he says, oh, I just want everything to be above board. And I guess what Tony kind of acts like it's like cool, basically like, oh yeah, of course he didn't even want to have sex with her anyways, no big deal.
Yeah. And then he immediately goes crying to his therapist. Of course, what
like
a stereotype.
Just like Livia would say, oh, you're gonna go cry about your mother to your therapist.
Yeah. About Christopher, it is like there's been so many relapses, quote unquote, that I'm like, I don't think he's been in like real recovery for ages. He's just not had drugs. There was the thing at the fair or whatever with all the lights in the background. There was a thing in LA. There's this, drinking the wine with Tony and what that led to and everything. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, people don't change. I've said it before.
Yeah, this season especially. I mean, I guess every season, but yeah, it really has had quite a few backtracks on his road to recovery.
Yeah. So Tony pitches this as like, this is my reward. This is what I get for being a good guy. And now I didn't have the affair. And now my piece of shit nephew's having this affair. And I got to talk to him and be reminded of him dicking down this woman I wanted to dick down. And it's all very frustrating for him. Even though Melfi chooses to see it in a bit of positive light there. You don't have to have sex with everyone, Tony. And that's okay.
And then Tony like finally gets like a light bulb in his head where he's like, I've been realizing these women, they're all sort of the same.
Yeah.
But
which
then
is what we said when Juliana was introduced. We were like, oh, it's Gloria again. It's like the same character again. He cops onto that now. And
he did then, but he also then uses that as a dig at Melfi, where he's like, maybe that's why I keep coming around here. Because, like we've explored in the past his attraction to Melfi in the same way he's attracted to some of these other women. And then he has to show, because like, just to hang out with you because, therapy, nothing really changes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess he's got a point there. He's made small steps at least, but he's a big part of why nothing changes. So
yeah. And he vocalizes what we've been saying all along. He actually says that nothing really changes with the therapy part. And like you said, we've been saying, we cut over to this scene of Christopher and Juliana doing drugs and watching Vertigo, Hitchcock classic in the cinema. Lots of overlays. You didn't really like this scene, I take it?
It's not that I didn't really like it. It's fine. It is like a fun play around with the style, but it just didn't feel like it fit. to me. I mean, going back to Sopranos, I mean, I guess it is kind of nice when people, when directors try to play around a little bit on the Sopranos, but it just didn't work for me as a whole. It's not bad or anything.
Yeah. So Tony gets, he's in Satrielli's and gets notified that the Fed, whatever his name is having a sandwich out front.
Yeah, Agent Harris. Agent Harris.
Ah, yes. Yeah. Agent Harris is having a sandwich, and he kind of wants Tony to come out. And I like this scene because it's like he basically tells Tony that, watch your back. Someone's, not very happy with you, and they might come after someone you like, just so you know. And he doesn't have anything to gain from that, really, I feel like. So it is actually, seems like it's true that he said what he said earlier, that no, I'm working other shit now, just thought you should know, like, so you don't get killed. Because obviously they're, I don't know, I just kind of like, you always love to see this camaraderie that occurs between the good guys and the bad guys, and who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. It's pretty clear in this one, to be honest. But yeah, what did you think?
No, I agree with you. I like that, like Agent Harris, it's like he misses Tony in a way. And it's not so much that Agent Harris is a corrupt officer, like going back to that Detective Home Alone guy from back in the day. Because it's not like he's on the pay or he's like doing, it's just he's been chasing Tony Soprano for so long and following him, but now he's on some other stuff that he like misses him and has like a weird fondness for him. And he, at the very least, like, this world's going to keep going on, this mafia, like organized crime thing. And if he at least can give him a tip and maybe help him out a little bit, he'll go through it. He, like you said, he misses those sandwiches.
Yeah. And like, it's Christmas or whatever. And I'm like, oh, this is nice. This is a nice moment. Yeah. So the next scene, we have Christopher and Juliana, in a diner, and they're kind of talking about their relationship and them doing drugs and everything. And they seem to be at a teetering point of like either breaking up or going back to Narcotics Anonymous or something. And the first shot is like from outside the window. And I think it feels intentional that they're like saying someone close to you might get hurt. And then we see them from outside the window. It's kind of like looking in on them like they're in danger, but that doesn't really go anywhere. Because it does feel like they're hinting at Christopher the whole time, even the earlier scene where it's like, fine, pick someone else. But yeah, we first have Chris. He's on the phone with his wife as he's, hanging out in the diner with his mistress / drug friend. And yeah, Chris starts getting into his oath that he made to when he became a made man. Stuff that he's not supposed to be talking about, which he does bring up, but for whatever reason they have this bond here. And I like how it gets to this place of like, I can't really tell who is the one pushing it to be like, we need to stop using, because sometimes it feels like she's the one, and then sometimes it feels like Chris is the one, but then it feels like either of them could kind of crumble at any moment and like not do it, not go through with it. Oh, my fault. Yes, because when they're sort of standing up there, it's really well acted and directed and cut of them like saying like, I don't know, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? Like, there's a meeting, and then like standing up one at a time. And I'm still not convinced they're not just going to go and do more drugs. Like, and honestly, I don't know, because like, I guess the only, because we don't see any more of them for the episode, I think. And the only indication that their relationship's changed maybe is when they come out and she asks if they're taking one car and he says, I'll follow you. And that's kind of a separation. Like, they had sex in the car, they did drugs in the car, and now they're like, no, we're going to go and do a thing. And it's not about that. So maybe that's an indication that there is some change, but then most of that is reverted anyway. So I don't really trust it. But I guess that's the point we leave them at. What do you think happened? Did they go to the meeting? Did they do more drugs?
I mean, I would have to imagine. I think you're right. There's completely separation there. And Chris is giving himself an out in a weird way, because it's like, they both ride in the same car. They're both a solid union here, going to get better. but then she could just head to the meeting and he can be like, oh, fuck this, and just turn off road somewhere. So I don't know. I feel like at least one of them did, and I'd have to imagine maybe Juliana did, and then Christopher didn't.
Okay. Wait, she went to the meeting or she did the drugs?
I went to the meeting.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, could be. Tony, who originally was all happy about this this heart attack, he's gotten the news that he might be in danger. He heads to the hospital, and he cracks out some of that soprano honesty. It's a rare thing, but it comes out from time to time, and it's quite impactful. He talks about how when he was in a coma, he went someplace, but he never wants to go back. And, you know, there's enough for all of us. We don't have to be killing each other over nonsense. Like my captain being a gay guy and you sodomizing him to death. It's all sort of between the lines.
Yes.
But
yeah.
it's a very emotional state that fills in. Like my estimation of him, I have to say, has fallen significantly. Seeing him weep here like a woman. But Tony does a good speech about how let's chill out. And then it's kind of when he's leaving, we get to see this character again, like, hey, oh, like getting in his face, which I
Yeah.
get the vibes you were talking about, like, hey, I'm the new guy now.
Yeah. He's like in his way, and yeah, I mean, it is like we're full circle now that Phil's getting teary-eyed here, because he might be on his deathbed. But it's a nice moment. But then, yeah, it's the nice reminder because he is literally standing in Tony's way at first. It's a nice reminder of like, you know, like the fight ain't over, Tony. Like it is, and it is better for you that Phil survives and maybe doesn't have his status plummet in people's eyes, because it's better for you in the long run. Did I lose you?
Hello?
Oh, did I lose you? I'm sorry. I thought I lost you. Can you hear me? Oh, no.
Jim?
Hey, I lost you there.
Yeah, I didn't hear any of what you just said because you started sounding like a big robot for all of that, and then it got silent, and I was like, well, that didn't work. So sorry.
Right. Oh, no worries. No, I was just saying, like, you know, the guy gets literally in his way, and it's just a nice reminder that Phil is better in the long run.
Yeah.
And yeah, there is some truth to what he's saying. There's plenty for everyone.
Okay. And so basically, that I guess is the emotional climax of the season, of him coming to this realization and sharing it with Phil. I guess that's all that this is built up to, his recovery and everything, because the rest of it is kind of the montage that is mandatory at the end of each Sopranos season. Although we do have a short scene with Carmilla, like this scene is basically just there to emphasize Tony was right. Tony did the right thing for himself personally, because she has these business cards and throws the one away for the private investigator and calls to work on her house instead.
Yeah. She's got that spec house, of course. And what's great, then we have before the montage, like, so yeah, it's Christmas. You know, we got like Bobby Jr.'s there. You know, the family's there. Tony's wearing a beret, which is hilarious.
I love it.
Because I like how it's like it's just there for a little bit before he later on says, you know, I'm wearing your present from Paris or whatever.
Yeah.
But he's also still pissed off at Christopher because what is he out like? What are you gonna hog all the ice?
Yeah, like you hog that pussy. That's basically what he's saying.
Yeah.
And they kind of exchange a look. And this is supposed to be like, oh, tensions are rising, but like, he's had him on the road with a gun to his head saying, if you do any more smack or any bullshit, I'm going to kill you. And he's turned up there, like, Christopher turned up and was going to kill him. And, like, they got a lot of history. I feel like in the long scheme of things, their family connection is stronger than this bullshit. But then, like, it's also, like, we're heading into the last season. If this was any other show, I'd probably go like, all right, so now we're setting it up so that it's going to be Christopher versus Tony for the big finale. And that
Yeah.
is so 100% not what I expect from this. So I kind of go like, yeah, whatever. There's some tension there, but that's family.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And then Meadow calls, and she's in California, so she's not there with the family. And yeah, we just have the montage. Like I mentioned before, we see AJ kind of with Blanca and her kid, and she gets to see this big gaudy home that they live in. Carmilla has some reservations on, I guess she's 10 years older than, is that what they say? She's 9 or 10 years older than AJ. It doesn't really look that way, but I guess they're kind of trying to stress that she's older.
Well, like he's in his early 20s, I would assume, or like 20.
Yeah,
she could be 30.
Yeah, I guess he's only supposed to be like 19, basically, right? Because is this the season that started, or is it last season that started with him in college?
Yeah, I'm not. I couldn't tell you, Jim, with a gun to my head. So yeah, she's 10 years older than him. I feel like that could be an assumption or an overstatement too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like I'm kind of like on your side, like you mentioned earlier. It's kind of like he's a changed man. AJ's doing great, even if Carmella's totally right in that AJ was literally like 2 episodes ago the biggest fuck up ever. Maybe don't have him hang out with this child and become a weird semi-father figure to then fuck all of that up. Like obviously though, from Carmella's perspective, it's like, oh, she's like not right for my perfect boy or whatever, but obviously subconsciously she must know that he's the problem, not her.
What does he get? He gets to throw something in Tony's face here too, because Tony makes a comment about something and he's like, yeah, I got a job or something like that.
About like, he got her some nice jewelry too.
Yes, I know a guy or something.
Yeah, which I like that, right? I mean, that's a positive for AJ because it's never been that, especially with him like getting all these treats and toys and cars and bikes. It's never been like, oh no, this is mine, I worked for this. Like I feel like in the past he definitely would have taken that, but now no, this is my thing, Tony, this is not your thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of the exclamation point on him being like, at least for now, a new person. Maybe change is real, maybe change can happen.
Yeah, it doesn't though, fortunately, because people don't change. So he's gonna go right back to his old ways, I think. But for now, anyway, we get an awkward, nice Christmas moment in front of the fire. So this was also not something I noticed. It was pointed out to me, but Kaisha is the name of the fake Black Guma, and Blanca is her name, and they're watching Casablanca. Kaisha, Blanca, Casablanca.
Yes.
Just a fun little pun there, kind of. I think it's intentional, but that's just me. Her name is Blanca, and they're watching Casablanca. There is something there, and she comments on the house, the casa. You have a beautiful casa. So many layers. I don't think it means anything, but there you go.
But it's just fun. Maybe they're just like, hey, this would be fun.
Yeah. Speaking of, I have to mention this. I loved it when I found out that Tara's Winter. Wrote the 50 Cent film. He.
Yeah.
Bit of a girly name, but there you go. Terrence Winter wrote the 50 Cent movie Get Rich or Die Trying. And they just throw it in as a joke that, like, I have the DVD in my car. They were giving it away at the car wash or whatever.
Yeah.
Because he wrote it. And, it wasn't a huge success, as I gathered from the box office or the reviews.
Yeah, I never even saw that one, but yeah, I remember them releasing it, and I think they were like, from the writer of The Sopranos. They wouldn't say like which. Not that Terrence Winter's like on the lower totem of he's definitely one of the elite Sopranos writers, but that's a great little joke to throw in there. But like, I remember your movie. Let's make fun of it.
Movie. Yeah, that's funny. Yes. So, having discussed the episode, do you feel any more positive or more negative on it?
I actually do feel more positive on it. I think any of the episodes when I'm feeling a little down on, when we talk it through, I definitely feel better on it. I still like the big stickling point is the finale thing, and again, that's probably nitpicking, and it is technically 6A, 6B, so it's like we're still going along with it. So I mean, I'm more positive on it now. what are your feelings here going into the final 9 episodes here, the home stretch?
Yeah, just the fact that there are 9 makes it feel like I'm already in the final season, even if I'm not. Because if there were another 13 episodes, I would go David Chase's route and just go, nah, we're going to start season 7. And in a way, I'm sure it will feel like that. But because it's not a quote unquote full season, I'm kind of like, all right, everything we've been building to, I'm going to take what we got from this season and hopefully we build on that and don't just start going on about like let's learn about Carlo's fish shop or whatever. Like I feel like stuff like that would happen, that we're just gonna go in totally new directions because we're gonna introduce this, like maybe this new guy in Brooklyn or whatever, he's gonna be a big deal, or maybe introduce a bunch of mobsters to get released from prison or whatever. Like I feel like those things could happen, but with the amount of time that's left, I'm like, I don't know, just I know you love an anticlimax, The Sopranos, and I'm sure it will be, but let's get some climactic stuff in there at least. I guess is what I'm hoping for. Even I'm not saying I need more explosions, but just dramatically speaking, psychologically speaking, like the whole therapy sequence, like Tony says, it feels like it hasn't been super impactful most of the time lately. Maybe have some revelations there. Maybe have him, because we had a lot of, I know I'm ranting now, but like early on in The Sopranos, there was a lot of drama like between him and Melfi, and like he's gonna stop therapy and she's gonna bring him back and all this stuff. And since then, it's just been like, here's another therapy scene and here's another therapy scene. Like either blow that up or do more with it. Just not that I'm saying that they're not doing more with it, but just for wrapping it all up, you got to do something with that, and like something with the scale of what's going on. I don't know if it all just kind of continues to be a low-key family drama and some people get stabbed occasionally. I'd be fine with that too. It sets weird expectations of this show, because I certainly am not going like, holy shit, what's gonna happen? Which has happened with other shows I really like. When you're going into the final season, you're like, holy shit, I can't wait to find out what happened. I don't really have that feeling with The Sopranos, but I still like it, obviously, a lot. So it's an interesting balance to strike.
Yeah, no, totally. Because I like that. I mean, especially with the recent release of El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie.
Yeah.
It reminded me of like the stark contrast between something like The Sopranos and something like Breaking Bad. Both great shows and like easy shows to compare because like anti-heroes and kind of subject matter they deal with. But obviously Breaking Bad is a very plot-driven show. And like obviously still has a lot of great character stuff, but Sopranos is clearly not interested in that. It's not interested in like the XYZ almost like video game type, we got to get this thing and then gets this thing, and but that lends to more excitement and tension.
Yeah.
And then Sopranos does that in like a different way, because it's like, yeah, it's obviously more character driven, because not so much because like they focus on it. It's because they're like not interested in in like having regular setup and payoff type stuff. Like sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. They're more interested in like fucking with your head on what you think is going to happen and then playing around with it, but like giving you something that you really want still. I don't know. It's a weird back and forth. And I'm definitely, not to get into this argument which show's better type deal, but like going through this show again, it kind of does solidify it more in my head as like the best show ever made.
Yeah.
In a weird way.
That's good. I think shows that go this route are more, they lend themselves better to a rewatch as well.
Yeah.
Because in Breaking Bad, once you know what happens, it's not as bad as Game of Thrones, where once you know what happens, it's like, oh, okay, I have to sit through all of this. In Breaking Bad, they still make it exciting even on a rewatch.
Yes.
But in The Sopranos, they're more interested in exploring the emotional depths and connections of the characters, and that's something you're going to be able to see different things from at different parts in your life. You're going to identify with different characters and journeys, and you got some mob stuff thrown in there for good measure too. So it's really a great cocktail blend. That's like, I think that's why there's loads of podcasts on it. I don't think you and me would do a bad Breaking Bad podcast, but we would like, we'd be discussing like, can you believe how well they put this together to make this effect happen in your brain? Like,
Yeah.
can you believe the camera work? It's fantastic, and these stylistic choices. And here it's kind of like, what did you feel about this part of this? And like, it's not super clear in what it wants you to feel all the time. And David Chase is famously like, "Fuck you! I'm not gonna tell you. I'm not telling you what to feel or think about it. Or maybe sometimes I am." And like, just keeping that ambiguity going. So yeah, very different shows. I was thinking of Breaking Bad as well when I was ranting about like waiting for the last season of Breaking Bad. You're like, holy shit, can't believe it's like I'm finally gonna find out. And now I'm kind of like, I'm not like that. But I also don't want it to end. So
Yeah.
there
I
you
think
go.
Game of Thrones is, even though it's obviously a different type of show, but that's a great comparison of like, just, because Breaking Bad, obviously one of the greatest shows ever made as well, but it's because they delivered also. Like, they set things up a certain way, but they were always able to deliver. I mean, obviously people have their own complaints, nitpicks here and there, but Game of Thrones, yes, which is a show I did do a rewatch for leading up to the last season, and not to be that person, because it's everyone shits on Game of Thrones now. There's still obviously great stuff in there. It's still worth a rewatch and whatnot, but there's a lot of it that does feel like, okay, yeah, we got to get through this. Okay, yeah, we got to get through this. And then hopefully there's this. And then it gets to the end. You're like, all right, we're all done. We don't need this anymore.
Yeah.
See you later.
I'm so
So
not tempted to rewatch it, which is sad because I still have like, I damn it, I should have made more videos about Game of Thrones. It's the most popular thing. I know we've probably talked about it here, but it's the most popular thing I've ever put online, that video about Game of Thrones, what I made. And you can find it on my YouTube. Well, yeah, it's a great transition, Jacob.
yes.
You can find it on my YouTube channel, Awesomepedia. You can also find more from me at awesomepedia.org. But yeah, I should have made way more videos about that when people actually cared. But then I already didn't really care, and I felt like I'd said what I needed to, and I wanted to be more of a David Chase ambiguous guy who just kind of is like, fuck you. And I never made any videos on it, but I should have. But now it's too late. Nobody cares. But I think a Sopranos video I would love to make now or in the future or in the past. Like, there's always more to get out of the show.
Yeah, completely. I agree. So yeah, we're gearing up to get into the final 9. There were a few things throughout this discussion. I mean, it was a long one. It was longer than the episode, but like we called out before, if you have your thoughts or feelings on some of the stuff we talked about, you can email us at showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com. I did get, or was that a tweet? Because I think there was something recently we got on the Sopranos. I think it was kind of some weird nitpick we had or something we had read in a different. Oh, it was Vito. Actually, yeah. Shit, we should have got this at the beginning, but I've always thought that Vito killed the guy after the accident because he was driving drunk and would have a problem when the cops eventually showed up to the scene of the accident. Enjoying the podcast as usual. That's Dan from Vermont. I guess that does make sense, but it's still like killing him, or just like, I don't know. He could have like smashed him in the back of the head or something. He could have done something else. If it was more worrying about the DUI that he was going to get, he could have just knocked him out and then drove away the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Though I guess, yeah, my issues with it were always more about like the choice of having that scene in there rather than the choice that he made, if that makes sense. But I see that does make more sense than we were nitpicking that scene at the time, so that's valid feedback. Yeah, so we'll be back very soon with the rest of the Sopranos. Until then, as I've already plugged my shit, but you can also go to jimandthem.com for more from Jim. And at showswhatyouknow.com, of course, you can find all of our other shows. We're launching new ones every other day these days. Keep an eye out for one called Real History, where we talk about historical film and television. That one's coming soon. More on that at showswhatyouknow.com. I think there's just one more thing, Jim.
Oh, yeah. Whoa, what's that?
Oh, it's Cut to black.